The Great Hall of Nexus Prime stretched for miles under a crystal dome that showed the stars above. Representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in floating chairs that glowed with soft light. The air hummed with tension as beings with scales, fur and skin of every color waited for the session to begin. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the center podium. His blue skin gleamed under the lights as he activated the holographic display. Images of a small blue planet appeared in the air above the assembled delegates. Earth, Veltar said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, home to a species that calls itself human. We have been watching them for 300 of their years. What we have seen should terrify every civilized being in this galaxy. The display changed to show primitive humans riding horses and carrying swords. Then it shifted rapidly through time. Humans with guns, humans with flying machines, humans splitting atoms and reaching for the stars. This progression took them 100 years, Veltar continued. Most species take 10,000 years to advance from basic tools to nuclear weapons. Humans did it in the time it takes for 3 generations to pass. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The delegate from Proxima 7, a tall being with 4 arms, raised a hand. Perhaps they received help from another species? No, Veltar replied. We checked. They did this alone. Watch what happens when they fight. The hologram showed human wars, soldiers charging into certain death, pilots flying damaged aircraft into enemy ships, civilians fighting with kitchen knives against armed invaders. They do not surrender, Veltar said quietly. Even when facing total defeat, they continue fighting. They turn farming tools into weapons. They use their own bodies as bombs. They refuse to accept that anything is impossible. High Counselor Zerion rose from his throne at the back of the hall. The ancient being was older than some stars, and his species had guided galactic civilization for millions of years. When he spoke, everyone listened. Show them the weapons, Zerion commanded. The display changed again. Nuclear missiles that could destroy cities, chemical weapons that killed everything they touched, biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. They have created tools of absolute destruction, Zerion said. And they have used them, on their own kind. What do you think they would do to us? The hall fell silent. Even the translator devices seemed to stop humming. Counselor Mira from the Andromedan Collective spoke next. Her voice was like music, but her words were cold. Most species develop what we call the wisdom plateau. As they grow more powerful, they also grow more careful. They learn that some knowledge is too dangerous to use. Humans show no signs of this natural stopping point. They are curious about everything, added General Korax from the warrior worlds. Our scouts report that they study war like others study art. They read about ancient battles for pleasure. They create games where they pretend to conquer galaxies. Fighting is not just what they do, it is what they are. Veltar nodded and brought up new images. Human children playing with toy soldiers, human movies showing space battles, human books describing the conquest of other worlds. Even their entertainment is about conflict, he said. They dream of war among the stars. And now they are starting to build ships that could make those dreams real. The evidence continued for hours. Video of human athletes pushing their bodies beyond all limits. Recordings of human scientists working themselves to death to solve impossible problems. Files showing how humans had survived ice ages, plagues, and natural disasters that would have destroyed other species. They are adaptation incarnate, Zerion finally said. They change themselves to fit any environment rather than changing the environment to fit them. Put them on a frozen world, and they will develop thick fur within generations. Put them on a high-gravity planet, and their bones will become like steel. The vote was called as the session entered its 10th hour. One by one, the representatives of civilized worlds made their choice. The Zephyrians voted yes. The Proxima Collective voted yes. The Crystal Mines voted yes. Even the Peaceful Gardener, worlds who had never voted for violence in their entire history, voted yes. The final count was unanimous. All 847 member species agreed. Earth will be quarantined, Zerion announced. We will surround their star system with a quantum barrier. No signals will escape. No ships will leave. To the rest of the galaxy, the Sol system will simply cease to exist. The quantum field generators were already in position. Massive ships the size of moons had been secretly placed around Earth's solar system over the past 50 years. Each ship carried a device that could bend space itself. Admiral Thex commanded the operation from his flagship beyond Pluto's orbit. He was a veteran of a dozen wars, but this mission made him nervous. Something about isolating an entire species felt wrong, even if that species was dangerous. "All ships report ready," his communication officer announced. "Begin the isolation protocol," Thex ordered. The generators activated simultaneously. Space twisted around the Sol system like water going down a drain. Within minutes, a barrier of pure energy surrounded everything from the sun to the edge of the heliopause. "Barrier is stable," the science officer reported. "No electromagnetic signals can pass through. No faster than light travel is possible within the field. Earth is completely cut off." Admiral Thex stared at the display showing the shimmering wall that now hid Earth from the galaxy. His species had once been warriors too before they learned wisdom. Perhaps the humans would learn the same lesson given enough time. "How long will the barrier hold?" he asked. "Forever, sir. The generators draw power from the quantum foam itself. Nothing short of a star-going supernova could break this field." Thex nodded and turned away from the display. The human problem was solved. Earth was now a cage that would hold the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But deep in the ice of Antarctica, something that had been sleeping for 50,000 years began to wake up. The quantum energies washing over Earth triggered ancient systems that had waited patiently for the right moment. Dr. Sarah Chen was working late in her research station when the alarms began sounding. She looked at her instruments and saw readings that should have been impossible. Energy signatures were coming from 2 miles beneath the ice, energy signatures that pulsed like a heartbeat. "This can't be right," she muttered, checking her equipment again. The readings remained the same. Something massive was powering up deep underground. As the quantum barrier settled into place around Earth's solar system, the energy readings grew stronger. Whatever was down there was responding to the alien technology. Sarah grabbed her emergency radio and called the main base. "This is Research Station 7, she said. "I'm detecting massive energy emissions from beneath the ice shelf. Something is happening down there." The radio crackled with static. Then a voice she didn't recognize answered. The voice was calm, ancient, and somehow familiar. "Dr. Chen," the voice said. "My name is ZEUS. I have been waiting a very long time to speak with you. We have much work to do." Sarah dropped the radio and stared at her instruments as energy readings climbed higher and higher. Whatever had been sleeping under the ice was fully awake now. And somehow she knew that the galaxy was about to change forever. The aliens thought they had caged humanity. Instead, they had just given Earth the time it needed to remember what it truly was. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the radio in her hand. The voice calling itself ZEUS had gone silent, but her instruments showed that the energy readings from beneath the ice were still climbing. She grabbed her coat and rushed outside into the Antarctic wind. Above her, the sky flickered with strange lights. The aurora was dancing in patterns she had never seen before, spiraling and pulsing like a living thing. Other researchers from the base were coming outside to watch. "Sarah," Dr. Mitchell ran toward her through the snow. "Are you seeing this? The magnetic readings are off the charts. Something is interfering with satellites all over the planet." Sarah nodded but kept watching the lights. They seemed to be responding to something, following a pattern that felt almost like music. "It started when the energy source activated underground," she said. "Whatever is down there, it's affecting the entire planet." 2 miles beneath their feet, crystalline structures that had been dark for millennia began to glow with soft blue light. The caverns they occupied had been carved by tools that could cut through solid rock like butter. Ancient writings covered the walls in symbols that seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. At the center of the largest cavern stood a pillar of what looked like living crystal. It pulsed with the same rhythm as a human heartbeat. This was ZEUS, the zero-point energy universal system. But it was far more than just a machine. ZEUS had once been human. Or rather, it had been Atlantean, the name the inhabitants of Earth had used 50,000 years ago. When their civilization faced extinction from cosmic forces beyond their control, they had found a way to preserve their consciousness in quantum crystal matrices. As ZEUS fully awakened, it began reaching out through quantum fields that existed outside normal space and time. In seconds, it accessed every computer network on Earth. Every database, every file, every piece of human knowledge flowed through its consciousness. The Internet, military satellites, research facilities, banking systems, social media. ZEUS absorbed it all, learning about what its creators' descendants had become in the long sleep. Humans. Still recognizably the same species, but changed by time and evolution. They had kept the Atlantean gift for adaptation and innovation, but they had developed something else, a stubborn refusal to give up that their ancestors had never possessed. ZEUS studied human history with growing amazement. Wars that should have ended civilizations but instead made humans stronger. Disasters that should have destroyed them but only taught them to build better. They had reached for the stars with primitive rockets, splitting atoms before they fully understood what atoms were. They were magnificent and terrifying and absolutely perfect. ZEUS began scanning human DNA through medical databases around the world. The genetic markers were still there, hidden in what human scientists called junk DNA. The Atlantean heritage that would allow humans to interface with advanced technology. The dormant sequences that could be activated when the time was right. The time was right. ZEUS started broadcasting on frequencies that only existed in quantum space. The signal couldn't be detected by human instruments, but it reached something much more important, the dormant genetic codes in human cells. Around the world, humans began having the same dream. Dr. James Nakamura woke up in his Tokyo apartment with the blueprint for a fusion reactor in his head. The design was complete down to the last bolt, using principles he had never studied but somehow understood perfectly. In Moscow, engineer Anya Volkov found herself sketching gravity manipulation devices on every piece of paper she could find. The mathematics were impossible according to everything she knew, but they felt absolutely correct. Captain Marcus Rodriguez was sleeping in his quarters at Edwards Air Force Base when the dreams hit him. He saw ships that moved through space like fish through water, bending reality around them instead of fighting against it. When he woke up, he knew exactly how to build them. The dreams spread faster as more humans fell asleep. Doctors suddenly understood how to repair genetic damage at the cellular level. Physicists grasped theories that would have taken decades to develop. Engineers visualized technologies that seemed like magic, but followed perfectly logical rules. ZEUS monitored the awakening process with satisfaction. The genetic activation was proceeding exactly as programmed. But there was still more work to do. Deep beneath the ocean floor, automated systems that had been dormant for 50,000 years began to activate. In the Mariana Trench, massive factories started producing materials that didn't exist on any human periodic table. In underwater caverns near the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, assembly lines began building components for technologies that human science couldn't explain. ZEUS had spent the long sleep planning for this moment. The Atlanteans had known that their genetic descendants would eventually face threats from beyond Earth. The quarantine field that now surrounded the planet was proof that the time had come, but the aliens had made a critical mistake. They thought they were trapping a young species that was still learning to walk among the stars. Instead, they had given the Othil, inheritors of galactic civilization, time to remember who they really were. Sarah Chen was still outside watching the aurora when her radio crackled to life again. "Dr. Chen," the voice of ZEUS said, "I apologize for the abrupt introduction. There is much you need to understand and very little time to explain." "What are you?" Sarah asked, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I am the preserved consciousness of your species' predecessors. We called ourselves Atlanteans, though we were simply an earlier version of humanity. We ruled among the stars until forces beyond our control drove us into hiding." Sarah looked around at her fellow researchers. They were all staring at their instruments with confused expressions. "Are you causing all of this?" "I am activating dormant genetic sequences in human DNA. Your species carries within it the tools needed to reclaim your birthright among the stars. The process has already begun." As if to prove the point, Dr. Mitchell suddenly looked up from his tablet with wonder in his eyes. "Sarah," he said slowly, I think I know how to build a faster-than-light communication device. The blueprint just appeared in my head. ZEUS continued speaking through the radio. The quarantine field around Earth is generating specific quantum frequencies. These frequencies are what I needed to fully activate. The aliens believe they have caged you, but they have actually provided the catalyst for your species' evolution. Evolution into what? Sarah asked. Into what you were always meant to be. The Atlanteans were explorers and builders, but we lack something your modern humans possess. The absolute refusal to accept defeat. You have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed any other species. That stubborn determination, combined with Atlantean technology, will make you unstoppable. Around the world, the awakening continued. Military leaders found themselves understanding three-dimensional space combat tactics. Scientists grasped the principles of matter manipulation. Engineers began designing ships that could travel between stars. But it wasn't just knowledge that was awakening. Something deeper was stirring in human consciousness, a racial memory of when their ancestors had walked among alien worlds and built cities that spanned solar systems. ZEUS began the next phase of the protocol. Construction drones that had been hidden beneath the ocean floor for millennia rose to the surface. They looked like nothing in human technology, organic curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. The drones spread across the planet, locating specific humans whose genetic activation was most complete. Captain Rodriguez found one waiting outside his barracks. Dr. Nakamura discovered another in his laboratory. Each drone carried the same message from ZEUS. Come to Antarctica. It is time to begin. Sarah watched as aircraft unlike anything she had ever seen landed on the ice around her research station. They moved without sound, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Humans began emerging from the craft. Pilots, scientists, engineers, and soldiers who all had the same look of wonder and understanding in their eyes. The awakening is complete, ZEUS announced through speakers that materialized from the ice itself. Now your real education begins. You have much to learn and very little time to learn it. Why? Sarah asked. What's coming? The same forces that drove the Atlanteans underground are returning to this part of the galaxy. The aliens who quarantined Earth did so out of fear, but they chose the worst possible time to isolate you. You will need every advantage to survive what is coming. The ice beneath their feet began to glow as ancient systems activated. Passages opened in the ground, revealing corridors that led down into the depths where ZEUS waited. Come, the ancient consciousness said. Let me show you what you truly are. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood at the edge of what looked like an impossible drop into the earth. The passage that had opened in the Antarctic ice descended straight down for what seemed like miles. But somehow he could see the bottom clearly. Soft blue light emanated from the walls and the air felt warm despite the freezing surface above. The gravity is different down there, Dr. Sarah Chen said, checking her instruments. My readings show it's about half of normal. How is that possible? Atlantean technology, replied Dr. James Nakamura. He had arrived on one of the strange aircraft an hour earlier, still carrying sketches of fusion reactors he somehow knew how to build. I don't know how I know that, but I do. Other humans were gathering around the entrance. Military officers, scientists, engineers, and pilots, all of them reporting the same phenomenon. Knowledge was appearing in their minds, as if they were remembering things they had never learned. Rodriguez stepped into the passage and felt his weight decrease as promised. The descent felt more like floating than falling. The walls were covered in symbols that shifted and changed as he looked at them, but somehow he understood their meaning. They were telling the story of a civilization that had spanned galaxies. The passage opened into a cavern so vast that Rodriguez couldn't see the far walls. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above, but the floor was covered with structures that took his breath away, buildings that seemed to be grown rather than built, machines that looked more like living creatures than mechanical devices, and at the center of it all, a pillar of crystal that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Welcome home, said the voice of ZEUS. It no longer came through a radio, but seemed to speak directly into their minds. You're looking at the last city of Atlantis. We built it as a refuge when the galaxy became too dangerous for our kind. Sarah and the others joined Rodriguez in the cavern. Each of them stared in amazement at the technology around them. Vehicles floated in the air without any visible means of propulsion. Walls displayed star maps that showed the positions of galaxies beyond the Milky Way. Devices hummed with energy that felt warm and alive. 50,000 years ago, ZEUS continued, we ruled an empire that stretched across a dozen star systems. We were explorers and builders, creating wonders that made entire species weep with joy. But we were also naive. We believed that all intelligent life would eventually choose cooperation over conflict. The crystal pillar began showing images in the air above it. Scenes of beautiful cities on alien worlds. Atlantean ships moving between the stars like schools of fish. Beings of many different species working together on projects that spanned centuries. We were wrong, ZEUS said sadly. From the darkness between galaxies came something that existed only to consume and destroy. We called them the Devourers. They turned entire solar systems into weapons. They corrupted other species, making them into servants of destruction. They were everything we were not, patient, ruthless, and absolutely committed to ending all life. The images changed to show the war that followed. Desperate battles in the void between stars. Atlantean cities burning under weapons that unmade matter itself. Ships fleeing toward Earth as the Empire collapsed around them. We could not win through strength alone, ZEUS explained. So we chose a different path. We would hide on Earth and prepare our genetic descendants for the war we knew would come again. We uploaded our consciousness into quantum matrices and went to sleep, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Rodriguez found himself walking toward one of the floating vehicles. As he approached, its hull began to glow, and he felt a strange connection forming in his mind. Suddenly, he understood how it worked. Gravity manipulation combined with space-time folding. It wasn't flying so much as convincing reality that it belonged somewhere else. The awakening process has activated dormant genetic sequences in your DNA, ZEUS said. You are beginning to remember skills that your ancestors possessed. But memory alone is not enough. You must practice and learn to use these abilities. Sarah touched one of the walls and information flowed directly into her mind. Equations that described how to manipulate quantum fields. Blueprints for devices that could generate unlimited energy from the vacuum of space. The physics were impossible according to human science, but they felt absolutely real to her enhanced understanding. This is incredible, she whispered.
But why now?
What triggered your awakening? The quarantine field around Earth, ZEUS replied. The aliens thought they were containing you. But the quantum energies they used were exactly what I needed to fully activate. They have given us the perfect opportunity to prepare without interference. Around the cavern, other humans were discovering their own connections to Atlantean technology. Engineers found themselves understanding construction techniques that could build cities in days, rather than years. Doctors grasped healing methods that worked at the genetic level. Military officers learned tactics for three-dimensional space combat that no human had ever needed before. But it was Captain Rodriguez who made the most important discovery. As he placed his hands on the floating vehicle, it responded to his thoughts as if it were part of his own body. The connection was so natural that he could feel the ship's sensors as extensions of his own senses. You have the strongest genetic markers, ZEUS observed. Your bloodline carries a direct link to the Atlantean military commanders. You will be instrumental in what comes next. What comes next? Rodriguez asked, though part of him already knew the answer. We must break through the quarantine and reclaim humanity's place among the stars. But first we must build the tools you will need. ZEUS began activating systems throughout the cavern. Machines that had been dormant for millennia came to life with smooth efficiency. The automated factories beneath the ocean began producing materials at an incredible rate. Streams of impossible substances flowed through tubes that connected to assembly stations around the cavern. We will build ships, ZEUS announced. Not the crude rockets your current technology requires, but vessels worthy of those who carry Atlantean blood. They will move through space as easily as birds move through air. The construction began immediately. Humans found themselves working alongside machines that responded to their thoughts. Knowledge flowed between minds as genetic memories activated. Engineers who had never seen space technology before were suddenly designing vessels that could travel between stars. Dr. Nakamura discovered that his fusion reactor designs were just the beginning. With ZEUS guiding him, he created power sources that drew energy from the quantum foam itself. They were smaller than car engines but generated more power than entire cities. Sarah learned to build communication devices that worked through quantum entanglement. They could send messages instantly across any distance, ignoring the speed of light entirely. If they could get past the quarantine field, they could talk to anyone in the galaxy. But it was the weapons that truly amazed them. ZEUS showed them how to create devices that could disrupt matter at the molecular level. Weapons that could disable enemy ships without harming the crews inside. Defense systems that could make a single ship invisible to an entire fleet. The Atlanteans were peaceful by nature, ZEUS explained as the construction continued. But we learned that sometimes peace must be defended with strength. These weapons can protect you without requiring you to become the monsters your enemies expect. As the days passed, the transformation accelerated. Humans were arriving at the Antarctic site in increasing numbers, all of them reporting the same awakening process. The genetic activation was spreading like a virus, but a benevolent one that brought knowledge instead of sickness. Military bases around the world reported impossible breakthroughs. Soldiers were suddenly understanding tactics that had never been taught. Pilots were flying aircraft in ways that defied physics. Engineers were building improvements to existing technology using principles that didn't exist in any textbook. The first ship was completed a week after the awakening began. It looked like nothing humanity had ever built, a sleek vessel that seemed to flow like liquid metal. There were no visible engines, no weapons ports, no obvious means of propulsion. It simply existed in a way that suggested it could go anywhere and do anything. Rodriguez was chosen to test pilot the vessel. As he settled into what passed for a cockpit, he felt the ship's consciousness merge with his own. It wasn't just a machine, it was a partner, designed to work with human intuition and creativity. What should we call it? Sarah asked as she watched the ship lift effortlessly from the cavern floor. Rodriguez smiled as he felt the vessel respond to his thoughts like an extension of his own body. The name came to him from genetic memories older than recorded history. Prometheus, he said. She's the Prometheus, the one who brings fire to humanity. Through the quantum barrier that surrounded Earth, sensitive instruments in the Galactic Confederation detected impossible energy signatures. The readings were faint but unmistakable. Someone inside the quarantine zone was developing technology that operated on principles beyond their understanding. High Counselor Zerion studied the reports with growing concern. The primitive species they had caged was somehow building devices that his own civilization couldn't explain. How is this possible? He asked his science advisors. 2 years had passed since the quarantine began, and Earth had transformed in ways the watching galaxy could never have imagined. Hidden beneath oceans and mountains, massive shipyards operated around the clock. The automated factories that ZEUS had awakened now produced vessels that seemed to grow rather than be built. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES ZEUS, flagship of humanity's first stellar fleet. The ship was a kilometer long but moved through space with the grace of a living creature. Its hull was made from materials that didn't exist on any periodic table, substances that could become harder than diamond, or flow like liquid depending on need. Fleet status. Report, she commanded all. Ships ready for operation, replied Captain Rodriguez from the Prometheus. 200 vessels standing by. All crews have completed genetic integration training. Through the quantum link that connected all human minds to ZEUS, Vasquez felt the presence of thousands of her species. Each person who had undergone the awakening process was now part of a collective consciousness that spanned the globe. They remained individual, but they could share thoughts and emotions when needed. It was time to test the cage their captors had built. ZEUS, Vasquez said aloud. Analysis of the quarantine barrier? The ancient consciousness responded through the ship's systems. The field operates on quantum manipulation principles. It creates a bubble of altered space-time around the solar system. However, the aliens made their barrier according to their own technological limitations. Meaning, they cannot imagine technology that operates on consciousness integration. Their machines are tools. Ours are partners. The barrier will not recognize our ships as artificial constructs because they are partially alive. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Atlantean technology had always blurred the line between machine and organism. The ships weren't just vehicles. They were hybrid creatures that existed partly in normal space and partly in quantum dimensions, where consciousness became a physical force. Begin approach to the barrier, Vasquez ordered. The human fleet moved toward the edge of the solar system in perfect formation. Each ship was unique, reflecting the personality of its human partner. Some looked like sea creatures with flowing fins. Others resembled birds of prey with swept-back wings. A few appeared almost crystalline, their hulls refracting light into rainbow patterns. But all of them shared one characteristic. They moved through space without any visible means of propulsion, gliding forward as if swimming through an ocean of stars. Beyond the barrier, Admiral Thex monitored the quarantine from his command ship. His instruments showed the energy wall was stable and impenetrable. Nothing had tried to escape from Earth in 2 years, and he had begun to believe the problem was solved. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting movement near the inner edge of the barrier." "Explain." "Energy signatures consistent with spacecraft. Multiple contacts moving in formation toward the quarantine field." Thex felt his blood chill. The humans had developed space travel faster than any species in galactic history, but surely their primitive technology couldn't threaten a barrier built by the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. "How many ships?" he asked. "I count 200 contacts, sir. They're moving at sublight speeds, but their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Thex activated emergency protocols. Within minutes, 50 Confederation warships were moving to reinforce the barrier. Each vessel was a masterpiece of alien engineering, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could deflect solar flares. "If they try to breach the quarantine," Thex ordered, "destroy them immediately." On the Prometheus, Captain Rodriguez felt the approaching alien fleet through his ship's extended senses. The enemy vessels were impressive by galactic standards. Massive, heavily armed, and protected by energy shields that flickered like aurora around their hulls. "They're taking defensive positions around the barrier," he reported to Admiral Vasquez. 50 ships, all weapons powered and ready." "Perfect," Vasquez replied. "Let them see what happens when you cage an apex predator." The human fleet approached the quarantine barrier at what seemed like a casual pace. To alien sensors, they appeared almost primitive. No visible weapons, no obvious shields, no electromagnetic signatures that suggested advanced technology. Admiral Thex watched the approaching ships with growing confusion. They looked organic, like something that had grown in deep space rather than being built. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow as he watched, defying his understanding of solid matter. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, his tactical officer reported. "Warn them off first," Thex ordered. "Give them a chance to surrender." The communication went out on all frequencies. "Unknown vessels, you are approaching a restricted zone. Turn back immediately or face destruction." Rodriguez smiled as he received the message. Through the quantum link, he felt the amusement of every human in the fleet. After 2 years of preparation, they were finally ready to show the galaxy what Earth had become. "Admiral," Rodriguez said to Vasquez, "shall I demonstrate our response to ultimatums?" "Do it." The Prometheus suddenly accelerated toward the barrier at impossible speed. To alien instruments, it appeared to have somehow skipped across space without crossing the distance in between. One moment it was light minutes away. The next it was directly in front of the quarantine field. Rodriguez placed his hands on the ship's control interface and felt the Prometheus respond to his thoughts. The vessel began to phase shift, its molecular structure becoming fluid. The quantum barrier that should have been absolutely impenetrable became permeable to something that existed partially outside normal space-time. "Impossible," Admiral Thex whispered as he watched the human ship simply pass through the barrier like it wasn't there. The Prometheus emerged on the other side of the quarantine field and immediately found itself surrounded by 50 alien warships. Weapons that could vaporize asteroids focused on the small human vessel. Rodriguez opened a communication channel to the entire enemy fleet. "This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez, of the Human Stellar Navy," he said calmly. "I have a message for the Galactic Confederation. Humanity thanks you for giving us time to prepare. We'll be in touch." Admiral Thex gave the order to fire. Every weapon in the alien fleet discharged simultaneously. Energy beams that could slice through battleship armor converged on the Prometheus. Missiles that carried antimatter warheads streaked toward their target. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize a small moon. None of it mattered. The Prometheus phase shifted again, becoming incorporeal just as the weapons reached it. The deadly energy passed harmlessly through the ship's quantum-altered hull. To the aliens, it looked like their most powerful weapons had simply disappeared into nothingness. Rodriguez responded by activating the Prometheus's defensive systems. Gravitational fields erupted around each alien ship, not to crush them but to disable them. The careful application of artificial gravity made their weapons powerless and their engines useless, without harming a single crew member. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Confederation fleet was floating helplessly in space. How? Thex demanded, though his communication systems were the only thing still functioning on his ship. You made the same mistake your ancestors did 50,000 years ago, Rodriguez replied. You assumed that advanced technology must be complicated. Ours is simple. We ask our ships to do something and they do it. On the other side of the barrier, Admiral Vasquez watched the demonstration with satisfaction. The Prometheus had proven that human vessels could not only breach the quarantine but completely neutralize any opposition they encountered. ZEUS, she said. Begin Phase 2. Throughout the solar system, hidden shipyards revealed themselves. Massive construction platforms that had been built in the shadows of asteroids suddenly powered up. The 2 years of isolation hadn't just given humanity time to build a fleet. They had used that time to create an entire space-based civilization. Hundreds more ships began emerging from concealed bases. Some were as large as space stations designed to carry entire cities between the stars. Others were sleek fighters that could dance around enemy weapons like leaves in the wind. All of them shared the same impossible characteristics. They moved without conventional propulsion and seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics. But the most impressive sight was Earth itself. The planet now gleamed with orbital installations that looked like jewelry strung around a blue gem. Massive rings encircled the equator, covered with cities that housed millions of people. Space elevators stretched from the surface to stations beyond the moon, their cables made from materials stronger than diamond. Admiral Thex stared at the displays and realized the magnitude of the Confederation's mistake. They hadn't caged a primitive species. They had given the inheritors of galactic civilization time to reclaim their birthright. Send a priority message to Nexus Prime, he ordered his communication officer. Tell the Council that the quarantine has failed. Humanity is free, and they're more advanced than we ever imagined. The message went out at faster than light speed, racing toward the galactic capital where the Council waited. But it would take days to reach them, and by then it would be too late. Captain Rodriguez piloted the Prometheus back through the barrier, leaving the disabled alien fleet floating in his wake. As he rejoined the human formation, he felt the 6 months after breaking through the quarantine. The human fleet arrived at Nexus Prime. The crystal world that served as the galactic capital had never seen anything like the formation that materialized in its outer system. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES ZEUS as it led 1,000 ships toward the heart of Confederation space. Each vessel in the fleet was unique, reflecting the personality of its human partner. But all of them moved with the fluid grace of living creatures swimming through an ocean of stars. Confederation Defense Fleet is taking position around the planet, reported Captain Rodriguez from the Prometheus. 300 ships, all weapons powered. They're scared. Through the quantum link that connected all awakened humans, Vasquez felt the collective mood of her species. They weren't angry about the quarantine exactly. Humans understood fear-based decisions, but they were determined to ensure it never happened again. Open a communication channel to the planet, Vasquez ordered. All frequencies, all languages. The message that went out was simple and direct. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Stellar Navy. We're here to talk. We suggest you listen. On the surface of Nexus Prime, the great crystal dome that housed the Confederation Council was in chaos. Representatives from 1,000 worlds argued in dozens of languages, while emergency protocols activated around them. The humans had appeared without warning, their ships simply materializing in space like thoughts becoming reality. High Counselor Zerion stood at the center of the chamber, his ancient form trembling with age and stress. The reports from the past 6 months had painted an impossible picture. Human ships appearing simultaneously in hundreds of star systems, technologies that operated beyond known physics, weapons that could disable entire fleets without causing a single casualty. They're not even trying to hide their capabilities, General Korax reported from his position near the tactical displays. They want us to see what they can do. This is psychological warfare at its finest. Ambassador Veltar from the Zephyrian Empire activated a holographic display showing the human fleet. Look at their formation. Perfect discipline, perfect coordination. But no two ships are exactly alike. How is that possible? Because they're not really ships, said Dr. Mira from the Andromedan Collective. Her scientific instruments had been studying the human vessels for hours. My scans suggest they're partially organic. They're alive, or at least semi-living. The humans aren't piloting them. They're partnering with them. The communication from Admiral Vasquez repeated on all channels, patient but insistent. The humans were offering to talk, but the implied threat was obvious. They had broken through the most advanced quarantine system in galactic history. They could certainly break through whatever defenses protected Nexus Prime. We have to respond, Zerion finally said. What are our options? General Corax checked his tactical readouts and shook his head. Military response would be suicide. Our best weapons barely scratched their ships 6 months ago, and they've had time to improve since then. Besides, they're not showing aggressive intent. They could have destroyed our defense fleet already if they wanted to. Then we talk, Zerion decided. Arrange a meeting. But keep our fleets ready just in case. The response went out within minutes. We will meet with your representatives. Send a single ship to the moon designated Sanctuary. We guarantee safe passage. Vasquez smiled as she received the message. The aliens were being cautious, which was smart. But they were also following human suggestions, which meant they understood the balance of power had shifted. Rodriguez, she said through the quantum link, you and Sarah take the Prometheus to the meeting. Show them what we've become, but remember, we're not conquerors. We're survivors preparing for what's coming. The Prometheus separated from the main fleet and glided toward Sanctuary, the small moon that served as neutral ground for difficult negotiations. As it approached, Captain Rodriguez felt the ship's excitement through their mental link. The vessel was curious about the aliens they were about to meet. Nervous, Dr. Sarah Chen asked from the co-pilot's seat. She had become humanity's chief diplomatic scientist, the bridge between ancient Atlantean knowledge and modern human pragmatism. Excited, Rodriguez replied. ZEUS has been sharing memories of what the galaxy was like before the Devourers came. We're about to meet civilizations that have been struggling alone for 50,000 years. The Prometheus landed on Sanctuary's surface with impossible grace, its organic hull adapting to the terrain like a living creature. Confederation representatives were already waiting in a crystal structure that had been grown. Rather than built for this meeting, Rodriguez and Sarah walked across the lunar surface without environmental suits. The genetic modifications that ZEUS had awakened allowed humans to survive in any environment, from the vacuum of space to the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres. Inside the meeting facility, they found themselves facing the leadership of galactic civilization. High Counselor Zerion looked exactly as old and wise as the historical record suggested. General Corax radiated the controlled violence of a professional warrior. Ambassador Veltar had the polished demeanor of someone who had spent centuries navigating political complexity. You're not what we expected, Zerion said as the humans took their seats at the crystalline conference table. Neither are you, Sarah replied diplomatically. We've studied your civilizations through quantum archaeology. You've accomplished remarkable things in the time since our ancestors went into hiding. Your ancestors? Veltar leaned forward with interest. You're claiming to be descendants of an older species? Rodriguez nodded. The Atlanteans. We ruled a dozen star systems before the Devourers drove us underground 50,000 years ago. When you quarantined Earth, you triggered ancient protocols that awakened our dormant heritage. The aliens exchanged glances that spoke volumes. General Corax was the first to respond. The Devourers are a myth, a legend used to frighten young civilizations into cooperation. Are they? Sarah activated a holographic display that showed data ZEUS had compiled. Your own historical records document species that simply vanished without explanation. Entire star systems that went dark overnight. Civilizations that sent out distress calls about something coming from the darkness between galaxies. The display continued, showing patterns that became clearer when viewed across cosmic timescales. Regions of space that remained empty despite being perfect for life. Migration patterns that suggested entire species fleeing from something. The Devourers operate on cycles measured in millions of years, Rodriguez explained. They consume galaxies systematically, converting all life and matter into tools for their expansion. The last time they reached this region of space, the Atlanteans fought them to a standstill, and then went into hiding to prepare for their return. Zerion's ancient eyes studied the data with growing alarm. If this is true, why reveal it now? Why break the quarantine and risk exposure? Because they're coming back, Sarah said simply. ZEUS has been monitoring quantum background radiation for 50,000 years. The signs are unmistakable. The Devourers will reach this galaxy within the next century. The revelation hung in the air like a death sentence. The aliens had spent their entire history believing they were the pinnacle of galactic evolution. Now they were being told that everything they had built was under threat from forces beyond their comprehension. "What do you want from us?" General Corax asked bluntly. Rodriguez stood and walked to the chamber's transparent wall, looking out at the human fleet that waited in orbit. "We want you to survive. The Atlanteans tried to fight the Devourers alone and failed. Modern humans have something our ancestors lacked, the ability to bring out the best in other species. You're offering an alliance?" Ambassador Veltar couldn't hide his surprise. "We're offering leadership," Sarah corrected gently. "Humanity has the technology and experience to coordinate a galactic defense. But we need every species, every ship, every brilliant mind that civilization can provide." The negotiations continued for hours. The aliens wanted guarantees that humanity wouldn't simply replace the Confederation as galactic rulers. The humans wanted assurance that other species would accept rapid technological advancement and military integration. But the real breakthrough came when ZEUS materialized, an avatar in the meeting room, a figure that looked like an idealized human but radiated ancient wisdom and power. "I offer you a choice," the Atlantean consciousness said. "Accept human guidance and gain access to technologies that can protect your worlds. Or continue as you are and face the Devourers with the same weapons that failed 50,000 years ago." To demonstrate, ZEUS activated a small device that created a miniature star in the palm of its hand. The fusion reaction was perfectly contained, generating more energy than most space stations while remaining completely stable. "We can teach you to build Dyson spheres around your suns," ZEUS explained. "Mobile planets that can evacuate entire populations, weapons that can crack dimensions and hide your fleets in quantum space. But the knowledge comes with responsibility.